Hey everyone, I want to share today about what is called protection magic or medicine, sometimes called apotropaic medicine, and its popularity. And I'm always super curious when something becomes popular as to why. I'm always just kind of fascinated by that. But I have noticed a lot of folks talking about protection and different methods of protection magic. And this is a cross-cultural phenomena. You see it almost in every culture, probably in every culture, that there is some traditions, techniques that convey what might be called protection. Of course, I'm coming from my own upbringing, my own growing up, and my family and community, which is Italian American, and as well as Catholic. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that, just knowing that this looks different in different places. But in my experience, we didn't talk about anything being like protection, like it wasn't spoken of in that way. It was just seamless, really, as part of kind of just being in life. And it was seamless because it was multi-generational. So a lot of things didn't have to be said because it was intact, right? Like the transmission of the practices was still intact. And I think that's part of why it's become popular, is because I think as secular life, maybe individualistic life values have become part of the dominant paradigm. We've lost some of these like intrinsic things that might be considered either religious or spiritual or even alternative medicine. And I also think maybe some of it is because we've become really hypervigilant. We know there's like an anxiety epidemic. And so people are looking for ways to stabilize. And that's really what I want to talk about, is what protection actually is. And when it's part of the daily life, part of family life, not it's very ordinary, I guess, in a way. It's not very obviously like, now we're doing this as protection. It was just part of this seamless sort of flow. So for instance, amulets and those kind of charms were very common in my tradition. And it was just part of, say, like custom. It was just very customary to receive. So for instance, in my family, we all receive a charm bracelet at a certain point in life, usually first communion, first confession, maybe earlier. Could be like a kindergarten graduation. So like points in time like that, you would just receive a charm bracelet. And then at each milestone or rite of passage, you would get a different charm. And those charms had different meanings. Each charm had a different meaning. And so, for instance, I got my nonna gave me a charm that had a mustard seed. It was a little mustard seed, and it had a prayer on it. And she said, use this charm when you need faith, because there's a fable that goes with it. So again, it wasn't like, oh, this is for protection, right? Like, so it wasn't like, oh, this is for you to be on the defense. It was like, oh, when you need this is there for you. So it was sort of like this almost like abundance, nourishment kind of thing, that you have these tools. Our ideas around protection now seem to come up as like this defensiveness, or like this, like I have to be on my guard all the time. And certainly there are times when we have to be on our guard and we have to be defensive. But largely protection magic, in my experience, is not usually about constantly having to fend things off, or even ever having to fend things off. It's so exhausting. And it's not even necessary, again, most of the time. The way that I understand protection is that it's a set of traditions, practices, techniques that work to, one, as I mentioned, remind us, remember that what we need is available. Again, not always, but often. And it brings us into what Ernesto Di Martino talks about in his book, which is a book I really like and recommend, Sud e Magia, and it's got an English title. I think it's called Magic from the South. He talks about it as presence. He talks about protection techniques working to bring people into presence, and he's talking about it in psychological terms. But really what that is that it creates a sense of stability. It's a stability of being. And so our tools, our techniques, our charms, our amulets, our mudras, our whatnot, in this sense, are less about fending off and more about being in our fullness, being in our resolve, being stable in who we are, knowing where we end and where others begin, knowing the difference between self and other, as well as being accountable for our own energy system or systems, and our relationality with others. So protection in this sense wasn't just me doing something to protect myself, but it was me having a charm that somebody else gave me. Many of you probably know that part of the tradition is somebody has to give you the charm. That puts you in relationship, right? So it's not just you fending for yourself. It's somebody else being in relationship with you, creating solidarity. So it's a nourishing practice. It's a practice of stability and nourishment. And when we do that, when we're in that way and we practice being in that way, we are less susceptible to outside negative influences to begin with. So we are going to be talking about this in depth in the upcoming course that I'm offering called The Magra and the Medicine, which is a 4-week course, and it starts this coming Tuesday, April 18th. We're going to talk about various aspects of folkloric Italian American witchcraft, what might be called witchcraft, and we're going to talk about protection as one module of this. I hope you can join us. We will be meeting live. It will be recorded. Link is in the bio. Hope to see you then. Bye for now.